Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Unstoppable Mindset, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet. You've heard that before, but the unexpected is what's the most fun about this podcast because it has everything to do with anything except inclusion and diversity. So we get to do that today. Anyway, I'm really glad you're here and really appreciate you taking the time. Tina Bakehouse is our guest today. And Tina, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for having me here.
Now, I was reading Tina's bio, and I don't want to give too much away because it'll be fun to talk about all of it. But one of the things that she starts her bio by saying is that she's involved in protecting audiences from boring speakers and speeches. And I'm really anxious to talk about that. I have heard some very boring speeches in my time. Oh, I don't even dare mention names, but I've heard some speeches that were really boring, which is no fun. But let's start this way. I love to begin by asking if you could tell us kind of about the early Tina, growing up and all that sort of stuff.
Sure, Michael. I was this little farm kid who grew up in Southwest Iowa, and my front porch of this farmhouse became my proscenium stage. And I loved to rope my younger brother and sister into a wide range of performances. We would do little radio talk shows on my Fisher Price tape recorder, old fashioned style with
Oh,
those little tapes, as well as create scripted performances for my parents' anniversary every year, do dinner theaters and things like that. And I just found this love for the spoken word and for performance. And as I evolved and grew into a young teen, I was part of speech competitions as well as community theater, did the high school musicals and all kinds of experiences of that nature, and went to college and pursued a communication studies and psychology degree. And during that time, I really became fascinated with the idea of how do we talk to each other, listen to each other, show up in various contexts to connect with each other, because communication is about connection.
mhm.
And I really found love with tapping into learning more about how people work non-verbally as well as verbally, and what really hooks people. Because as a child, I loved a great story. I was a humongous fan of Jim Henson and the Muppets, and I
Hmm.
always was fascinated how they created story on the Muppet Show and entertain in such a fun, creative way. And that's the power of our voices, is that we can draw people in and we can bring them to their feet and inspire, motivate action, or we can connect with one another and in a way that's a beautiful dance of conversation. And that's what I really love doing. And what I found in my journey is guiding people on that path of tapping into their inner magnetism, because we all have that ability to communicate with confidence and clarity. So I love the teaching piece.
Wow, you have said stuff that opens up so many questions, but we'll try to get to a bunch of them. But I agree with you, and communication is really all about connection. And unfortunately, it cuts both ways where people connect and just go by whatever they go by and they don't analyze, or sometimes they analyze. But how do we deal in our world today? I don't like to talk about politics, but leaving out the politics of it, how do we deal with our world today? And I guess it goes back to the beginning of elections ever. You've got politicians who say, trust me, and so many people do, and they just look at what the person or listen to what the person says, but never really analyze. And that's a dangerous thing to do. Um, but the politicians are communicating well enough that they just get people to connect. How do we deal with that?
Well, I think it goes way, way back to Aristotle's logos, pathos, and ethos. Is
Mm-hmm.
every communication context there's a target audience, there's an occasion for what people expect to happen, and the context affects and impacts the content. And so asking yourself in terms of logos, that's tapping into the logic of content and researching, getting that background information, and being aware if you're speaking at a conference, or if you're going into a networking event, or if you are a politician, it's acknowledging speaking to that given geographic area, that demographic, and doing your research ahead of time. That's the logos piece. The ethos is the credibility of really getting the ethical of showing up in truth. And you mentioned, saying, trust me, trust me. Well, that's on you as the speaker to be full of integrity and to say what you mean and mean what you say. And you do so with consistency of showing up and being in your being. And the final piece is the pathos. It's that emotional appeal of really speaking from the heart. It's that balance. We can get very heady. And I think in today's world, it's maybe even a challenge to tap into the heart, because we can argue with each other, not meet each other in the middle. And I think if we can find, and I've found this in my experience, is do what intuitive Abraham Hicks talks about, and that is segment intending. And you set an intention prior to the communication and be with yourself, like have self-awareness, because communication intelligence, or even conversational intelligence, comes from self-awareness of, do you regulate your emotions appropriately? How do you think about the upcoming audience, the event, the content of your message? Because if you don't sit with that prior, you're going to influence and impact how the message lands. It may not land at all. And so I would say really being self-aware first, because that will ground you. And once you get grounded into your own energy and awareness of the situation, then you can meet the other where they are. But you're right, we're in challenging times where we tend to have conversations with people that have the same belief system. And I've really been of a mindset in the last while is to get curious and ask questions. I remember years ago when I was traveling in the Serengeti and had the opportunity to meet this beautiful doctor who had been practicing medicine for many, many years. And he was in his 80s and still practicing medicine. And he was from South Africa. And he would just, as this erudite, he would share and bestow upon me so much knowledge, information, and expertise. And as we were saying our goodbyes, I asked him for advice. At the time, I was a professor at a university. I said, what should I tell my students in this communication class? What advice do you have? And he said, Tina, always be curious and always ask good questions, for that's never failed me in 50 years plus of practicing medicine. So if we get compassionately curious about the other and know that they have their own experiences and story, that's going to influence how our influence with how we communicate.
And I absolutely buy that and I subscribe to it. It just seems to me, and I read about it often today, we have so many people who just seem to have lost or never had the art of conversation, and they don't want to converse. How do we deal with that?
That is a challenge. Absolutely. Obviously we don't have control over someone else's choices or
Right.
their behavior. And so it's meeting the audience or the other where they are. And so that could be a person who's more of a closed communicator, where they might be more focused on systems and working with things and being with things, not people. Or they're blocked because of some negative experience. We simply don't know.
Yeah.
And again, it's meeting them where they are. So for example, I've encountered closed communicators before. And so I really just observe first, instead of just coming into their little bubble non-verbally and break through that bubble. The theater person in me has learned very quickly, the pandemic gave us that 6 feet bubble, which I think is actually important. Before you break through that, is approach with compassion, because some people are not comfortable with that. And just observe and be with that person first, and maybe just ask a question and see where it lands. Tune into their nonverbal cues, tune into their paralanguage as their tone of voice. And if they're terse with you, which can happen, I think it's acknowledging, thank you for even this time, and being, full of appreciation for who they are, and be okay with maybe it's not the right time
Hmm.
and you're capitalizing on a hard time for that person. Maybe make a request like, hey, I'd be interested in having a conversation. Maybe it's the wrong channel. A phone call would be better. Or maybe it's just a direct exchange via email, which they would be more comfortable with, in terms of they just have severe social anxiety. So it's first observe, listen, notice more, and meet them where they are, and get into being okay with that they may not want to have a conversation, and you simply can't control it, because all
Yeah.
communication has a sender and receiver, and it's a two-way street. And so sometimes you have to, if you're going the wrong way on a one way, you got to turn around and say, thank you, and be of good peace-centered energy, and move forward.
Yeah, it is. It is so difficult. I think a lot of the whole issue with the art of conversation today, especially when you're dealing with the political world and so on, is that so many of us are locked into attitudes and our own positions to the point where there's no room to discuss or to even consider giving an inch. And we really need to get away from that. It doesn't mean that we need to change our opinion, but
Right.
it's really more about listening than it is about conversing.
Absolutely. And just from communication theory, converting someone and their belief system takes multiple communications. And generally that may not even convert
Right.
their belief system. So absolutely, I think that's a great point, Michael, is meeting them where they are and being open to engaging in discourse with someone who has a very different perspective, and ask those questions and listen, and really listen.
Yeah. And I think that's really the issue. For me personally, going back to being curious, I love to talk to people who have different viewpoints than mine. Um,
Hmm.
and I would hope, at least when I'm conversing and talking, my goal isn't to convert. I don't think that should be my job. If I say something that causes somebody to think differently, that's fine. But my goal is to listen and learn and understand. And I
Hmm.
think that's what we really need to see more in the world. And some people really don't care about the facts, and it's amazing. But that's not my choice.
Well, right. There are high elaborators and low elaborators. It's the elaboration likelihood model that was created, I believe, in the 80s. And so your high elaborators are those individuals that really extract content of message, and they focus on content more so than the delivery style.
Hmm.
Low elaborators focus on delivery style. So we have more low elaborators in the United States and world, I would say, that get impact very much tuned into how the person delivers with their tone of voice, with their charisma. That draws people in. And with that being said, I think it's really crucial to be aware that because we have this distinct way in which we choose to listen, that everybody, it's so empowering if we people just want to be seen, they just want to be heard, they want to have a voice and be comprehended in a way that they are authentically who they are, not trying to be anybody else. And that could be different than you, and that's okay.
Yeah, and it should be. I think
Yes.
it's so much fun to have conversations. As I said, I love to learn, and very frankly, that's what I get to do on all of these podcasts. And as I tell people, if I'm not learning at least as much as anybody else, I'm not doing my job very well, because
Hmm.
I want to really learn a lot of things. You talked about
Absolutely.
the Muppets before, and I can't help it. I'm going to have to spring one thing. And that is, I remember the original Muppet movie. And there was at one point when somebody, and I can't remember which Muppet it was, said something like, I am just beside myself. And this real quick, and it took me several times at watching the movie to hear the response, which was, yeah, and how do the two of you live with each other? It was just something that happened so fast that they were so, and, those who do it still are so creative.
Absolutely. And witty and timely and really just good natured, which it's refreshing.
Mm-hmm. And it's just so much fun. Um,
Absolutely. I mean, I was grateful because that was my era of my childhood
yeah.
to have updated movies in 2011, and I believe even a year or two past that, where they had actors with the Muppets again, and it was just playful and fun and delightful and physical comedy, fun self-deprecating comedy that was not, hateful or mean, which was very, very refreshing.
No, Miss Piggy's mean.
She's still in these
No,
updated, I
she's
would
not.
say she's
She's
very
not mean.
pointed.
She's not
She
mean. Do you ever watch 60 Minutes?
I don't. I have not. I mean, I did years ago every once in a while with my parents, but I haven't for years and years.
My favorite 60 Minutes of all time, and I'd love to get a copy of it, had Morley Safer interviewing Miss Piggy.
Oh, funny.
Well, yeah, let's just say the interview really went the other way. She was just on him. It was so funny. She got him speechless. She kept calling him Morty instead of Morley and just all sorts of, it was absolutely the most hilarious Muppet or Miss Piggy thing I've ever seen. She was great. I was
Well,
impressed. She should be
yeah,
on
and it's
60
that
Minutes herself.
puns. Yeah, they just play with language. They have fun, and they're just in the moment. They're in that improvised, fully present moment.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about your thoughts about being a speaker and rescuing audiences from boring speakers and so on. What are some of the big mistakes you think that most speakers make, or that a lot of speakers make? I don't want to say most speakers. I won't be a stereotype soul, but what do you think are the mistakes that speakers make that make them so boring to people?
Well, I think more times than not, we're very egocentric. We think the speech is about ourselves. And I think that that is a false
Mm,
mindset. And in the process of writing and publishing my book, Discovering Our Magnetic Speaker Within, I worked with and communicated with a wide range of speakers whom I actually witnessed magnetism. One keynote speaker and an actual communication coach mentioned it's about serving your audience. If you show up all about them, it's a we thing. And
hmm
I even, with the title of my book, I did get some critique on, well, why don't you have Discovering Your Magnetic Speaker Within as the title? Well, it's not a your thing, it's an our thing. If you give a speech and no one's choosing to listen, did it ever really happen? And it depends on an audience.
hmm
So I would say that that's the number one faux pas. I've been guilty occasionally of this too, and I've had to shake myself out of it, is okay, it's doing that audience analysis and really focusing in on what does this audience need to know, want to know, and what do they know already? And start with what they know and build into the new information. And that foundationally assists in your preparation for a given presentation. So I
Yeah.
would say some mistakes. The first one is that the speaker makes it about them and not a service or serving the audience. So being audience centered is essential. It's the foundation to being magnetic and to be engaging. A second mistake is that and I'm going to go back to the self, that we tend to have an inflated view of how good we are as speakers. So that comes from lack of preparation. Some people just show up, and there are gifted speakers that have a heart-centered space and they can maybe do very light to little preparation. But by and large, people have a warped perception of how good they are. It's sort of like if I were to ask you, how fast can you run a mile? It's very measurable. You can say, you know, whether or not you could do it in 10 minutes or less. But if I said, are you an effective magnetic speaker? Well, that's very abstract. So we really, and I even think audiences, they know it when they feel it, and
Mhm.
feelings are so abstract. And think of all the different energies that are within and composed in an audience that,
Mhm.
everybody has different experiences, different perceptions, etc. So that's the other piece, another mistake. And finally, I would say, in addition to, the audience centeredness and the warped perception or unclear perception of our abilities, is again a big mistake, is not being flexible in the moment and being aware of, well, if especially when you're facilitating a workshop, I really tune into what does the audience need in this moment. And so I have a foundational prepared 2-hour workshop, but it feels differently for each given audience
Mhm.
because of what I get from them. It's like a tennis match. It's a back and forth dance. And so being flexible, and even being able to refer to a previous speaker, if you're a keynote speaker in a given conference and you've heard the other speakers, I think that can really impact. And it's engaging with story and balancing that with data. So that's the
Yeah.
biggest one, is think about the audience, think about the self, and think about the content that you embed the story.
One of the, well, when I give a speech, and I've done certainly bunches of them, and I can tell the same story. People always want to hear about the World Trade Center, but what happens is I believe that I don't talk to an audience ever. I believe I talk with an audience. I think that's extremely important. And when I am giving a speech, I do know that there are certain things that I can say that I've learned to believe should probably get specific kinds of reactions from the audience. And when I say a particular thing, I can tell whether I'm connecting with the audience or not. And I have absolutely changed on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but again, I can tell the same story, but the intonations and other aspects of it may be totally different for one audience from another, or over another. And I think that's extremely important because my job is to connect with the audience. And you're right. I want to really understand them, know what they want, know what they need. I love, whenever I'm going to speak somewhere, is to go and hear other speakers who speak before me. I don't mind doing the opening speech, and I've done that before, but I love to speak later because I get to learn more about the audiences and learn so much from them. But I do believe that it's all about talking with the audience. They have to be part of it.
Oh, absolutely. I love that you bring that up. In fact, I've said that to so many clients. Do you want to be a presenter or a communicator? So you can either present at your audience, which is very performative, to your audience, which is more presentation, or with them, which is what much more of a conversation. And honestly, I think when you frame it that way, it does take the load off your shoulders
Mm-hmm.
of that anxiety and apprehension that we tend to put on public speaking.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. When I discovered doing it that way, um, did so much more to connect with the audiences. You're right. It absolutely took a lot of the pressure off, and it made the speech more fun for me. And making it more fun for me made it more fun for the audience as well.
Oh, they love seeing you have fun.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they're having fun right alongside you.
Yeah. And sometimes in the middle of a speech where I'm supposed to be doing a speech, I'll ask questions, and
Oh,
I'll want,
yes,
and
embedding
I'll,
rhetorical questions.
yeah,
That's a great
not
device.
even rhetorical. I want them to answer, and
Oh,
I'll wait to
great.
get answers, which is a lot of fun. And then I incorporate that into what I'm doing, and it's so much fun to do. But again, it's involving them. I don't necessarily do a lot of that, but I do some of that, and it depends on the audience. Sometimes I will try to draw them out more than at other times. I learned when I was doing professional sales that the best salespeople are really teachers, and they're also the best learners. And what they should do is never ask a closed-ended, like yes or no question, but always ask open-ended questions in order to learn more about what the audience or the customer needs. And that is so important to be able to do. And it is just as true when you're dealing with speaking to an audience.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's so much fun.
Yes,
When
it is.
when did you publish your book?
Well, I just published October of 2023 with
Oh,
Manuscript Publishing, so it's pretty fresh, hot off the press. And I, prior to that, worked with Georgetown University in their book creators group and got accepted into their publishing program with their manuscript publishing. And then this just yesterday, I did my re-records for my audiobook with my producer and updated the manuscript. So that's on its way to be potentially up and running late spring, early summer. So that's exciting.
that will be great. And
Yes.
uh I will want to read that when it comes out in a readable form.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the hard, I have a hardcover, I have an ebook, I have a paperback, and then I'll have audio. So four different styles, and trying to meet all those different learners in the way they prefer to download information.
Yeah. So how does your temperament impact your communication with other people?
Temperament is essential, and it's part of the journey of awareness. I'm certified in Keirsey temperament, and what I found in that journey of learning more and more about his work, and Keirsey, David Keirsey is was a social psychologist that did a lot of work building off of what we know as Myers-Briggs
Mm,
psychological insight of the self. And he did more listening and observing and noted that who we are is about 50-ish% just in our DNA makeup, that it just, that's who we are. And the other part is the environment. So our personality is built with this equation of temperament, which is your natural born inclinations, your DNA, to use words, behave, work, communicate, and lead in a certain way. And then the environment or character in terms of what you were nurtured, the type of people you were around, the experiences that you've had that definitely impact who you are. Temperament, I have found, has been a beautiful insight and tool, not just for myself as a communicator, but to draw out of my clients the best, most magnetic communicator that they can be. So it's first acknowledging what is their core value, because they speak to that. And when you are aware that you're more of a random communicator than a sequential one, that is helpful in team meetings, because as a random, and I'm very much a random creative, I can drive a very logical, sequential meeting facilitator or person, frankly, frustrated. And I found that I have to really negotiate and navigate those situations and being flexible with my style. Sequential takes me extra work, but it makes sense. When you speak, you need a sequence, a beginning, a middle, and an end.
hmm
And I have to work extra hard because I have these random squirrel, squirrel, squirrel thoughts, and acknowledge that moments of that are okay. But if I did that all the time, people would struggle being able to follow the message,
Yeah, they
particularly in the
wouldn't keep
formal.
up.
Yeah, yes. So that's an important piece. The other part of your temperament that I believe is very helpful to be aware of is your propensity to use abstract and have a preference for abstract words or concrete. And we use both as human beings. But if I'm much more love philosophies, love the abstracts, and using metaphor and analogy, but I know if I sat in that space all the time, and I wouldn't reach 90% of the audience, which are much more preference to concrete.
Hmm.
And so it's having the sensory details and all of that as well. So that self-awareness is huge. It also helps then once you're aware of your own core value and how that impacts how you communicate, it's then seeing the other three with clarity. And when you are able to be aware of, oh, that some people really have a various core value, I need to, there's some people in the audience that really value just having fun, whereas others want to have more of the knowledge and the credibility, and they value that much more. So you want to balance those out. If you have too much knowledge and data, that's going to be heavy on the scale and go over the audience's heads. But if you're all about the fun and have no depth, that again lacks balance.
Yeah.
So temperament really, I think, supports your influence as a persuasive communicator because your audience has two choices: to tune you out or choose to listen.
Yeah. Well, and as I said earlier, one of the things that I work hard at is knowing how my audience is accepting what I say by different phrases that I might use that I've learned get a specific kind of reaction. And if I don't get it, then I'm clearly not doing something right and I have to work on it. But I also agree that it really varies from audience to audience. What's the audience looking for and how does the audience feel? And on one day, an audience may go one way and the same group of people may react differently another time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it could be time of day you're presenting. It
Yeah.
could be something that's going on, the morale of the organization. If you're doing a corporate presentation and they just got some bad news or something didn't, land
Yeah.
well. Absolutely. That's a great point.
Well, I also think that there are different kinds of techniques that speakers can use. One of the things that frustrates me is going into a speech, listening to a speech where really what they're doing is projecting a PowerPoint on a screen and just reading the PowerPoint.
Oh
Where
my
is,
goodness.
yeah, where is the real value in that? Um,
Right.
and
It's death by PowerPoint.
yeah,
And
I see it way too often.
oh, absolutely. And I think what's really important is using the different learning styles and embedding that throughout your talk. If you're doing a formal keynote, workshop, etc., and being aware that you tend to favor your own learning style. I'm very much an audible learner.
Mm-hmm.
So that includes stories. I love listening to podcasts. I love analogies. I love puns and alliteration, all of that. That's beautiful. But if I only do that, I'm really missing out on the visual learners who do appreciate a picture, a quick video clip, maybe a prop, etc. And the kinesthetic learners who love movement, like by a
Mm-hmm.
show of hands, or what word comes to mind and you have them yell something out, or talk to your partner about. That's really helpful of balancing those different styles as well as the written form to reflect on the content of your message.
Yeah. I think one of the advantages potentially I have as a speaker is compared to most people, I'm different. How often do they hear a blind speaker? And the advantage of that is that I do get to study audiences, and I've been to a couple of places where, as it turns out, they were very uncomfortable with a person who was blind speaking, and my job was to work to get a more favorable reaction by the end. And there's one time that I didn't, and it turns out it was a very elderly group, and most of them, for whatever reason, weren't even really hearing what I had to say. But I didn't find that out till later,
Oh, sure.
which
Well,
is no
and
fun.
yeah, that would be a challenge. I would say I'd be curious, Michael, if you can really tune into energy because you don't get to see nonverbal cues. I would love to hear your perspective on the how do you read an audience in your world?
So I think that when dealing with an audience, a cue may not be verbal, but there are a lot of other ways to tell what's going on. How fidgety is the audience? What
Mm,
kinds of background noises do I hear or don't hear? Um, at one point, usually when I'm telling the World Trade Center story, I talk about the fact that we were on the 30th floor and firefighters were coming up the stairs, and the first one stops right in front of me, and he says, are you okay? And I say, sure. And he says, we're going to send somebody down the stairs with you to make sure you get out. Of course, I have to imitate his New York accent. So we're going to send somebody down the stairs with you to make sure you get out. And I go, Witcha,
Nice.
Witya, Witcha. And, and I say, look, I don't need any assistance. I'm okay. I came down from the 78th floor. I really can do just fine. And we go over it a little bit. And finally I say, look, I got my guide dog here. And he goes, oh, what a nice dog. And he pets the dog without asking. And I say to the audience, so let me tell you, unlike what the firefighter did, don't ever pet a dog without asking, because the dog is in harness, they're working. So I got to sneak that lesson in. But anyway, then I finally say, I've got a colleague here who can see. And so the guy lets me go without needing to escort me down the stairs. And I explain why I didn't want his assistance or anyone's assistance for a lot of reasons. They don't know how to walk sighted guy with a blind person, which is a problem. But also, I didn't need them to take someone out of their position, because they're all a big team and they're going up to fight whatever's going on. And they didn't need to help me go down the stairs. So we finally get beyond that. And this is what I'm leading up to. And the last thing that the firefighter does as he's leaving is he pets Roselle, my guide dog, and Roselle gives him some kisses. And then I say to the audience, and that may very well have been the last unconditional love that he ever got in his life. And that reaction is what I'm waiting to see, whether it's an intake of breath, whether people just are fidgeting, or whether the audience goes silent. And so there are a lot of ways to get a reaction at various times when I am speaking, or any blind person is speaking, if they learn how to listen for them and learn how to work at it, where there is a lot more audio or auditory information available if you know what to listen for. So, yeah, there are times that it could be a problem. Or I'm doing a speech and I hear every so often people getting up and leaving and maybe going to the restroom and maybe coming back or not. And again, there are just so many different kinds of aspects that I can use in terms of my delivery and so on to gauge how the audience is reacting to what I say and don't say.
Yeah, so I would be curious. I mean, obviously that's feedback when you're hearing their behavior. So when you hear the fidgeting or people leaving, now clearly physiological functions, biology, there's those moments, but how do you alter, what is it that you consider or do in that moment when you're acknowledging, oh, they're fidgeting, this is clearly not landing as I thought, as it did last time in a different group?
So one thing I might do is immediately ask a question. Like, we're talking about the World Trade Center. Are you okay with me telling this story? Or I might say, tell me a little bit briefly about your own experiences and observations, assuming that they're old enough to remember the World Trade Center. So there are a lot of ways then to re-engage them. And I've had to do it occasionally, but when I do, it draws them right back in. And again, yeah, there are bio things that come up and so on, but when I hear a lot of it, then it means a different thing than if it's just like one or two people that get up and go out. And the other thing that's fun to do, and I love to observe this if a room isn't totally crowded, is looking to see if people are sitting in the front of the room. And if there are, I know, empty tables in the front of a room or empty seats, in the course of discussion, I may choose a time to say, I know that the front row seats are really pretty empty. Let's take a break. Why don't some of you move up to the front of the room? I might see you better, probably not, but the dog will love it. Again, it's all about engaging the audience. And most of the time, very frankly, I've been fortunate and don't have to do a lot of that.
Well,
but
I
I've got
love
the
that
tools.
you have strategies too, that when that maybe that moment happens, but I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, and it's part of what needs to happen as a speaker. There are a lot of ways to get the same information, and the assumption that most people have is, well, nonverbal communications, you'll never see it. Don't think so for a minute. There are a lot of ways to get information and see how well the audience is engaged. And again, I've been really blessed that pretty much for the most part, it works out really well.
That's wonderful.
Now, I have given PowerPoint presentations too. Well, when I did sales presentations, I would do PowerPoint shows. But again, what I didn't like to do, although I had a complete Braille script, my Braille script was pretty unique because it had all the words that were on the slides. It also had a description, because we put it in there, of what the pictures showed. But for me, it also we created the script that also said where on the screen the pictures would show up.
Oh, wow.
So I could, for example, point over my shoulder and say, on the left side of your screen you'll see, or on the right side of the screen you'll see. And the value of that is I never looked away from the audience. I didn't need to turn around to see where things were on the screen. And as I changed slides, my laptop, although the volume was loud enough for me to hear, wasn't loud enough for other people to hear. I knew that the slide changed, but I could continue to, if you will, make eye contact with the audience and keep them engaged. And one day I did one of those, and a guy comes up to me afterward and he said, "I'm mad at you. We're all mad at you." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because you gave a very good presentation. It was not boring because I don't read the script. I verbalize what's on the script and add to it." But he said, your presentation was absolutely not boring, but the big problem was we forgot you were blind because you never looked away from us. You kept looking at us, and so we didn't dare fall asleep like we do with most presentations."
That's wonderful
And of
feedback.
course, my immediate reaction was, well, it was okay if you had fallen asleep because the dog's down here taking notes and we would have got you anyway. But it's all about, I think you're absolutely right. It's okay to do PowerPoint presentations, PowerPoint shows, but you don't read what's on the screen. You really need to continue to be a speaker.
Well, it's called a visual aid for a reason. It's to aid the speaker, support the speaker, be secondary to the speaker. And frankly, when I do my TEDx talk later this year, I have one slide I'm using and I have a prop, and I'm just sharing information and connecting with my audience, because I feel like you have to really be intentional with how you use those slides, and they need
Yeah,
to support your information and not be a crutch like some speakers make them be.
yeah. Usually, I'll be talking with whoever's planning the show, and they'll ask if they can put a prop up, a picture of the World Trade Center or a picture of my book, Thunderdog, or whatever. And I'm fine for them to do that, because they'll show it on screens and all that. And that works out perfectly well. So, I'm fine with it. And I think there's a place for props. And occasionally I will have something else if I'm doing a talk that is going to involve technology. And a lot of times people are curious about how I do different things. I will have something up there that I can show so that they can really see how I do the things that they do, although I do them in a different way. And that's fun too.
It's that individualized means of being that you are owning your style, your authentic speaker style.
Yeah. So I understand you lost your voice once. That must have been fun.
Fun is probably not the adjective I would use. It
Oh, come
was it
on.
was a unique experience. It was a surprise. I mean, imagine teaching, of all things, public speaking, and I opened my mouth in a sophomore speech class. This was years ago, and nothing comes out, not even a squeak. I mean, I've had some hoarseness in the past, but this was, I opened my mouth and nothing came out. And immediately a student assisted me, got the principal in, and I had to go home because I I couldn't teach. I mean, I finished that class and wrote things on the board, but you can't do that for 8 periods in a day.
Wow.
And what I found during that time when I came home and it didn't return and it didn't return, I started to panic.
Yeah.
What is happening here? Because this is really, it's like, it's part of my business. It's part of what I do. I'm an educator. If I can't speak, that's going to really put a wrinkle in what I'm
Yeah.
doing with my career. So I decided that I needed support and sought out a speech pathologist. And we went through breathing exercises, and she analyzed that I had gone through some anxiety, and it was the anxiety that really tightened up my vocal cords because I had a very couple tough classes that were challenging in terms of behavior. And so anxiety was really impacting, the stress was impacting those vocal cords.
Mm.
So from her, she then connected me to a laryncologist who specialized in opera singers, and he assessed my vocal cords and looked at me and went, you have vocal cord nodules. And I was like, oh no. Julie
Ooh.
Andrews from Sound of Music had this
Yeah.
very thing, and she had the surgery that permanently changed her pitch, made it
Hmm.
lower. And he
Yeah.
did give me two options. He said you could do the surgery and your voice could change and be lower, or it could remain the same and be more hoarse. Or you can do 6 weeks of silence, and that's no laughing because that's very hard on your vocal cords, which is hard for me. I'm a gut wrench, like
Yeah.
guffaw. I have a big hearty laugh. No talking, absolutely no cheating on any of this, and whispering's the worst as well. So
I
I
was going to
opted for
ask
this.
that.
Yeah, it's the worst. So I did the 6 weeks of silence. And what I found during that time, as I had a myriad of one-sided conversations, a lot of people popped by, wanted to visit, and I would just listen. People want to be seen, heard, and share their voice, their
Yeah.
ideas, their opinions, their stories. And I became very clear that it's all about being fully present, about letting go of what's going on in my head, noticing more of what's being said, not said, and using everything, like what's going on in their world and being impacted potentially by what the other says, don't not coming in with my own agenda. And that was a powerful experience. And I found as I was working on this audiobook in January of this past year that my voice was doing the same. I started to squeak a little bit because I've been experiencing burnout from nearly a 2-year stint of running a
Hmm.
business and doing this book and having intense deadlines with my publisher. And I found, oh my gosh, I need to meditate. I need to relax. No amount of warm tea. Food, it's a myth. Food does not impact your vocal cords.
Hmm.
And so it's the warm beverage, the temperature can help soothe, but it's being very cognizant of your stress has a bigger impact. And I just learned so much from that experience. And then the weirdness of it happening again years later, it was like a weird parallel experience of, okay, lesson learned, take care of thyself to put forth a voice that you want people to hear for this book.
Years and years ago, I attended a training program. It was a 1 day thing by Ken Blanchard, the 1 minute manager guy.
Mm-hmm.
And several of us from my company went. And he made a comment that good speakers often will drink something warm, like water with lemon and honey, before doing a speech. Never milk, because that's the mucus thing. But over the years, I developed a taste for tea.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have tea in the morning. I'll have a few mugs of tea in the morning, and generally not later in the day. But the warm the warm liquid, as you say, is very soothing. It does make a difference. Food, nah, but the tea does help, and it's mainly that it's a warm beverage. I've never been a coffee drinker, but I've grown to like tea, so that works.
Well, and especially it's the temperature and the liquid to keep it moist that
Yeah.
is helpful more than anything, but the breathing piece is really,
Yeah.
really influential as well.
Yeah. And it's important to do that.
Hmm.
Well, you are a communications consultant and coach. How are you different than other people who are communications consultants and coaches?
Well, I'm a holistic communication consultant coach where I have that foundation of the more than 20 years of teaching, researching, engaging in the content area from not only the high school level, but the as a professor at a college or institution, but then also, I come from a spiritual background, and when I
Hmm.
work with my clients, I look at them as a soul and really understanding the mind message mechanics, and that it's really tapping into our heart, getting out of those conditioned beliefs, and being the loving, wise adults that we're called to be, because that impacts the kind of message you create and then the way you impart it out into the world.
Yeah. And I think that's important. And my impression, just in talking with you all this time, is that although I think there are a lot of people who will do their best to analyze and think about a client, um, you approach it probably in a little bit more unique way from a communication standpoint, so that there's a connection that's probably stronger or more vibrant than a lot of people would have with clients.
Well, everything is energy, and that people feel your magnetism or lack thereof. And that's why it's coming from the heart. And that will definitely be a stronger, more influential presentation.
So, what is your business called? You said you have a business.
I do. It's called Tina B LLC. And I just, at the time in 2020, during the pandemic, when I'd been doing this consulting and coaching work on the side for more than a decade, I struggled with the name and I just thought, well, use my own. And when I say, hey, Tina B LLC, yeah, you know me. And people have found it to be very easy to find me. And in terms of what I do and how I facilitate the work that I do, it's not only through my magnetic leadership blueprint series, but also my magnetic speaking blueprint series. They're 6-month programs, and I love doing those individual programs to support people, guide them on their journey, and facilitate virtual and in-person workshops. And finally, keynotes.
Yeah, which is cool.
Yeah, ranging from yes and leadership with my background in improv to temperament to storytelling and magnetic communication.
Tell me a little about improv. That must have been fun to learn to do, or how how did all that come about?
Well, I have a theater degree, and
That's true.
naturally, it's one of the things that they throw you into to get that experience. And then as I got into my world of the adulthood, I decided my play yard is improv. It's high risk, high reward.
Hmm.
And in terms of community theater, I just didn't have the time commitment that that requires. So I still take improv classes. It's my beautiful way of laughing and learning. And it's all about yes and, which means accept the other in the moment as it occurs and add something to it. And I found that this has made such a huge impact, not only on my life personally with my relationships, but also in my work life as well.
Good to be flexible.
It is absolutely. It's making your partner look good. It's all about that creative piece, the innovation, working the brain in such a way that you align with your heart, being in the moment, and tapping into that is just a beautiful experience.
Well, one of the things that I'm a little curious about, going back to your business a little bit, is you're in rural Iowa. How is it doing a business from rural Iowa, especially when you have to travel and all that? Where's the nearest airport?
The nearest airport is Omaha, Nebraska, about 45 minutes away. And
Ah,
really, I'm lucky that we have this thing called technology because this is how we're connecting.
yeah,
Zoom, Google Meets, all of that has been amazing to expand my business nationally and internationally and to feel connected during the pandemic.
yeah. Well, Omaha's only 45 minutes away, and that's a fairly good sized airports. So that's pretty convenient when you have to travel.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, and I agree with you. I'm not in a rural area, definitely a suburban area. Victorville is about 80, 85 miles northeast of Los Angeles, and we're about 40 miles or so from the nearest airport, about 45 to 50 minutes from Ontario, California airport. But again, um, figured that out early, and it's a lot easier to go to Ontario airport than going all the way down to Los Angeles to LAX. So that works.
It
Um,
absolutely works.
yeah. And and there's a shuttle service up here, so I can travel, but also Zoom works well. Now, doing keynotes for me with Zoom isn't as easy because I don't always get the same kind of ability to distinguish audience reactions because it's a
Right.
lot quieter, of course. So that's a little bit more of a challenge.
Oh, absolutely. You don't get that feedback.
No. So it is something to to deal with.
Yes, it is. And so I think it's great that you challenge yourself and put yourself out there in that way.
Oh yeah, and I have no problem doing Zoom and all that as well. Well, you clearly like to storytell, and I know you get a lot of that from doing theater and so on. Tell me a little bit about telling stories.
Well, telling stories has just been a part of my day-to-day being. As an oldest of three, I supported my sister learning how to read because I loved a good book, like Nancy Drew books, and loved to embody characters by creating. And I found that in my experience that stories really connect our our ways of being within ourselves and making sense of the world, but with others,
Hmm.
because they have high stakes. It's a shared experience that really draws people in, whether you're entertaining at a party or you are presenting formally and everything in between, even facilitating a meeting with your team. And so I love anything from a fun story of watching Ted Lasso, which talk about rich, great characters, and
Yeah.
then having that shared experience with my family to talk about it afterwards, to when I sit down with a great book, whether it's a children's book or a nonfiction or fiction text, and really put myself into the story and learn from that main character, the protagonist, to embodying that practice in how I market my business naturally and how I connect with other people. So it's imperative. I feel like it's part of human nature because our
Mm.
brains are wired for story. And when we hear a great story, it literally, that oxytocin, that hormone that really supports us wanting to help other people, increases
Yeah.
when we tell stories, which to
Yeah.
me that makes it such a powerful persuasive tool.
And nothing like a good story to make life a lot more fun anytime.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, as we wrap up, I'd love your thoughts on what you might say to somebody who wants to be a speaker. What are some basic kinds of advice that you would give someone who's looking to speak or to to involve themselves with other people like that?
I would say 3 tips. The first is to analyze with authenticity, step back and be aware of, where does speaking play in your business, in your personal and professional and life in general, and where are you, where do you want to go? And what is your speaker style? Are you at a level that you're happy with, or do you want to expand and grow? So be in that analysis phase of, where am I? Where do I want to go? And analyze that very honestly. Second, it's craft your content in a clear, powerful, purposeful way. Every single speech that I've seen that I've been moved, it's clear that it moved and mattered to the speaker. So your passion leads your communication. Don't talk about something you don't care about.
Hmm.
and put yourself out there in a way that is meaningful and true. My spouse is a farmer. He cares about soil health. That's his mantra. It's his North Star. So he goes on panels and speaks at conferences about his practices to add diversity to the soil. Speak the truth and take the time to prepare. The last is you can perfect your performance or get it to a way that you feel you're anchoring in your confidence by practicing frequently, having a speaker ritual, tapping into those vocal and physical mechanics, and eliciting the support of a guide, whether it's a style that you need real help in terms of crafting the message, which I do that kind of work, or it's getting out of your head because you're in your own way, which is more mindset and heart-centered means of being. I do that work. Or it's just, I know that I've got a great speech. I just can't deliver it. My voice is shaking or my body gets stiff. That's the mechanics. So eliciting that help from someone who knows what they're talking about can really make an impact and get you there faster. So when
Yeah.
you put in the reps, just like the Super Bowl was not too long ago, coaches make a difference. They readjust at that halftime spot, and coaches get you there faster. But it's finding the right support if you are wanting to expand and up level your speaker style.
Right. There's never anything wrong with having a coach and someone to advise and help you and look at what you do objectively and who's going to be honest back with you.
Well, right. And I've elicited the help of coaches for my business and feedback and support with my presentations as well, because I know I don't know all, and I never will. I'm always like you, Michael, learning, growing, stretching.
It's a lot more fun.
It is a lot more fun. Totally agree.
Well, if people want to reach out to you and maybe talk about you being their coach and all that, how do they do that?
They can reach out to me on my website at tinabakehouse.com. That's Tina, Tina, Bakehouse, B as in boy, AKE, house as in casa.com. And you can certainly find my book is there, resources, videos, my blog. I write a couple a month to support you and guide you in the power of magnetic communications, storytelling, strategies, and more.
Well, Tina, thank you for being here on Unstoppable Mindset. Clearly, you have one, an unstoppable mindset, that is. And I'm really glad that we had the opportunity to spend a bunch of time and talk about speaking. It's one of my favorite subjects because I learn every time I get to talk about it, which is, of course, for me, the whole point.
And I
So,
learned from you as well. It's a beautiful connection in that regard.
well, we'll have to do more of this.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to thank you again. And I want to thank all of you, wherever you are, for listening to us and I guess watching us today. Please give us a 5-star rating wherever you're encountering our podcast. We really appreciate the ratings, especially those 5-star ones. But if you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to email me. You can reach me at Michael, Michaelhi, at Accessibe, ACCESSIBE.com, or go to our podcast page. That's always a great place to go. He said with a very prejudiced idea. You can go to www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. Michael Hingson is MICHAELHINGSON. So michaelhingson.com/podcast. Love again to hear your thoughts. And for all of you and Tina, if you know of anyone else who ought to come on Unstoppable Mindset or you think they ought to, I buy it. I'd love to hear from you with any recommendations and introductions that anybody wants to provide. So again, I want to thank you, Tina, for being here and making this happen. This was a lot of fun, and I really appreciate your time.
Well, I appreciate you as well. Thank you for the invitation, Michael.